welcome back to SeAnderson Tech. Today I'm going to give a quick update on what I've been doing with the Raspberry Pis from the last video. And mostly it's been configuration, just trying to figure out how to automate out the configuration. That way, if I ever need to reinstall my Raspberry Pis, it's quick and simple to run a playbook, add all of my custom configurations in, such as the default text editor, some custom settings on my Vim, default packages that I want to have installed, and all these things are going to be done automatically through Ansible. And so far I don't have every single task automated out that I can, such as the host name. I need to set it so that it automatically registers and sets the host name correctly. That's something that I have to do manually still, but something that you can do with Ansible. And there's a lot of different things that I have in there, and we'll go through some of it and just show what it looks like. But the way I built it out this time, and I talked about playbooks in one of my previous videos, but this time, instead of doing just a playbook, I took all of the different pieces of the automation that I have written out and broke it down into what's called roles. And a role is essentially a modularized component of Ansible. Basically, what I can do is I can take all the different components of a playbook and break them down into their own separate files, such as variables or your tasks or your inventory, and have it all broken up into specific files and have those grouped together with similar functions. So for my configuration management, I could have configure machine as one role, or I called it common, or set installing packages and have it install all the packages that I need in that specific role. And so having different roles built out means that I can take those roles and put them into other playbooks in the future with similar functions as the playbook that I'm building out today. Now, building out this automation, I did run into a couple of errors like this, and it's saying that our vimrc does not exist. Or like this, and as you can see, it did fail again. Or like this. All right, fourth time's the charm, right? And with these different hiccups that I had, it was really easy to go into the playbooks and modify a couple of tasks or modify some variables. But the biggest problem that I had was I built out my automation and tested it out on my virtual machines, which are running Fedora Linux. Now, my Raspberry Pis aren't running Fedora Linux, they're running Raspbian. And so the difference between the architecture was just different enough that I had to build out specific customizations for each one. And so in my playbook, I would say, hey, if this is Fedora, run this task. If it's Debian based, or Raspberry Pi in this case, run this task instead. And so that made it possible to quickly adjust some of the different playbooks and run the automation the way I needed it to. Let's get into a little more of what it looks like. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to test my playbook and my roles out on a couple of test machines first. And to do this, we're going to be using we're going to add in my machines into this test group that I've created inside my inventory file. And so just adding those in, we now have 4 test machines that we're going to run this against. These are all virtual machines running on my desktop, and they should all be identical. These 3 right here are going to be running on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Sith, I believe, is actually running on Fedora, and so we have a couple of different versions to test this against. Now, coming over here, we're going to run this Ansible-playbook site.yaml, and we're going to add in the KK options, and it's going to prompt us for an SSH password. So we're going to add that in, and it's going to prompt us the password for become, and it's going to run this and gather some facts, and it's able to connect to each of those. And you can see that it is changing things and adding the users that I wanted to add. Now it's going to make sure that Vim is installed and verify that some other packages are installed and configurations are pushed out. And so next time when I run this, I won't actually need to use that -kk command, because now I'll be able to SSH in with my SSH keys. And as you can see, it came back on all 3 of those machines, and there were 8 changed items there, and it looks like everything worked correctly. So now that my testing is done, the next step is to go in and ensure that the host names are set correctly. Alright, so testing this one last time, we're going to run this against my all of my nodes, including my Raspberry Pi nodes, and I made a couple of adjustments as I was going through this whole process. I made a whole bunch of mistakes and was able to fix most of them, so that just goes to show that a lot of IT is trial and error, and developing these scripts isn't always going to be perfect right off the bat. So testing is always a good idea. So going through and running this, it's going to go and run all my different tasks that I had before. I actually broke up a lot of the tasks because my Debian-based systems, my Raspberry Pis, are running a little bit differently than my Fedora-based systems, which have those slight architectural differences between the Fedora and the Debian. And as you can see, it goes through, and everything, most of this has already been configured correctly, but this did go through and make those configuration changes. And you can see that it ran. So if we come into those Raspberry Pi nodes, you're going to see that although I did make those changes, it doesn't affect this Raspberry Pi group, or the Pi user, because that has some existing customizations in it already. So what I ended up doing was I changed the files that get copied to the new users. And so if I were to sudo su into SeAnderson T, you can see that my prompt did change like I wanted it to. And so you can see a couple of those changes there. Also, if I were to create a file, vim test, it does have my customizations there as well. So the numbered lines that appear when I am working with the different files. So now that I have everything built out and configured, it makes it really easy for me to quickly run this playbook anytime that I need to rebuild in some of my tasks moving forward. One, I might consider rebuilding this on Fedora instead of Raspbian, because I like having one single environment rather than having to run this on multiple different environments, because having one single environment makes it a lot easier to manage. But since I do have it built out, it makes it really easy for me to have that flexibility, and as I move forward I can make some adjustments. It's not too difficult to maintain that playbook for a couple of different environments. If I started going above 2 or 3, that is where it gets a little bit more complicated. And so with your home lab, I recommend trying to keep it to 1 or 2 operating systems. Also, some other things that I want to build into this playbook are I want to build another role, or find another role that will install Kubernetes, set that all up for me, and set up the worker and the control nodes and connect them to each other. Building this out is going to save me a lot of time when I add more nodes into the Kubernetes cluster. Setting up your Kubernetes within your automation is essentially how you want to be doing your IT infrastructure. When you build out your infrastructure as code, then that gives you the flexibility to quickly rebuild your environment if ever there's a disaster. So if you need to go out to a new environment, since you've already built it out, it makes it really easy to quickly just stand it up, either in the cloud or in your virtual data center, just as a couple of different examples. And so this is essentially building out your IT infrastructure at home. Now, this isn't the only thing that I'm going to do with these Raspberry Pis. Really, the Kubernetes cluster is for me to learn. I've never used Kubernetes before, and I sell related technologies every single day, so I want to know how to use it. So that's one of the first things that I want for my Pi cluster. Now, beyond that, I've got a couple of other ideas, but I'm going to keep them a secret until we get a little bit closer. Now, thank you again so much for watching and hitting subscribe and watching my videos. I've been having a lot of fun with this. I've seen a little bit of an uptick since my last video, and it seems that people are a little bit more interested in this Pi cluster. So I want to do a couple more videos around that and tying in Ansible along the way to show how you can quickly build out your infrastructure and make it repeatable IT automation. And again, as always, if you like the video, please hit like and subscribe and hit the bell icon for the notification, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.